Number 5. Ed Warren's haunted house. Ed and Lorraine probably spent more time inside haunted houses than most people spend inside regular houses. As the world's most storied demonologists, they certainly knew their way around a haunting. Was it their calling, perhaps? Ed Warren would disagree, saying he thinks a calling is something lofty and majestic in his own words, but rather he thought that it was something that had in fact guided him to becoming a warrior of the spirit world. Perhaps it was a twist of fate from the start that made Ed pursue his career in demonology, as the first house he had ever lived in as a boy was a haunted house. Makes sense, right? In fact, Ed Warren's first ever reported interaction with a spirit was when he was just a child. The Warren family landlady, who Ed Warren described as not particularly nice, hated kids, dogs, cats, and would sit by the window and yell at neighborhood kids. She lived above them and would pass. Ed describes an encounter when he was a young boy where he went upstairs and saw his closet door swing open by itself. Inside the closet was a small, floating dot of light that began to grow and grow and grow. In a few seconds, the light grew to the size of a person and manifested as the landlady, wearing that same scowl that Ed would recognize. Ed ran down and told his father what he had seen, who had told him to just forget it and never tell anyone. He wouldn't tell, but he certainly would not forget. And Ed Warren credits this incident with being the inciting event to inspire him to research the paranormal and to study the things that live beyond our world. Soon after this event, he would start to be reached in dreams repeatedly by dead relatives he had never met, including an aunt who would send him messages about his future, offering him guidance, and telling him that one day he would walk alongside priests but would not become one himself. He was attending a Catholic school while also living in a haunted house, a fact which amused him greatly as a boy. He said, although he didn't like going to church, he would pay extremely close attention to lessons about spirits and demons, as he knew it was going to be incredibly important in his life one day. And my ghouls and goblins, if you're looking for more facts and videos about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the cases they've studied, cryptids, aliens, and just about everything weird and unusual, Top 5 Scaries got all of that and then even more on top of that waiting for you. So click on through, find something freaky, creep on creeping on, and subscribe, maybe. Number 4. Lorraine's abilities. Much like her husband Ed, Lorraine would know from a very early age that the spirit world was reaching out to her. Barely even 3 blocks away from Ed Warren, Lorraine lived. Was it fate that had brought them together? Some divine purpose? Or a happy coincidence because they lived pretty close together? Lorraine Moran had a knack for extrasensory perception, and as a young girl had believed that everyone had this sixth sense that they had access to. She didn't know that we're not all psychic. Sorry, Lorraine. At the time, Lorraine was attending a private all-girls academy, and one Arbor Day, the nation's favorite holiday and every child's favorite holiday, her class was planting trees outside in the front, and Lorraine found herself distracted. She describes how as soon as the girls in her class had planted the sapling, she looked at it and saw it not as a sapling, but rather vividly saw it as a completely full-grown tree, with its branches stretching outwards into the sky, its leaves blowing and falling. Lorraine said it was indistinguishable from the real thing, not like a hallucination, like she could see it right in front of her. She said she couldn't even tell that it was a second sight. She was completely lost in the majesty of the tree when her teacher asked her what she was doing looking so intently. She said she had been staring at the full-grown tree. Her teacher, confused, asked her if she was seeing the future, and rather matter-of-factly, Lorraine responded that yes, she was. Although Lorraine thought answering honestly was the right thing to do, she was sent to a weekend church retreat to pray and pray and pray away her delusions. Lorraine learned rather quickly to keep mention of her extrasensory vision to herself, as most people in small-town Connecticut didn't quite understand her abilities. It wouldn't be until she was 18 years old and met Ed Warren that she would find a confidant who understood what she saw and how she could use her gift to help people. Number 3. How psychic is she? Naturally, Lorraine's psychic abilities came into some scrutiny. I mean, that does make some sense. I mean, you claim you're psychic, people are gonna ask you all sorts of annoying questions like, are you really? No one just trusts you. Interestingly, even Lorraine herself didn't fully believe in the paranormal until she made a career of it. In the beginning, Lorraine was wary of just about everyone they had met, and believed that the people who were reporting these hauntings or describing strange things in their home were just speaking with an overactive imagination, or were just making things up for attention. And save that point for later in the video, because that's gonna come up again. It was only after working several cases where she started to notice recurring trends between everything that they'd worked on and all all the things that these cases were telling her that she started to believe that what she was doing was real and there was a grander connection to it all. After they started to become more well known for their work on the cases that inspired The Conjuring or the Amityville horror, there was some outcry from people who said that Lorraine was faking this and the two of them were faking it. So to quiet her critics, Lorraine had herself tested by a doctor named Dr. Thelma Moss, who is a parapsychologist studying abilities outside the human experience. Researching things like extrasensory perception, the spirit world, Lorraine went for extensive psychic testing, and the doctor had reported that Lorraine was an above average clairvoyant. Ooh, put that on the fridge. In the 80s, Lorraine and Ed were renowned enough as psychics that even law enforcement officers took note of it, and had actually requested for Lorraine Warren's aid on a string of missing persons cases, believing the help of a psychic would be just what they needed, a move that was seen as a bit controversial at the time. Number 2. Their relatives carry on their legacy. Although Ed and Lorraine Warren themselves unfortunately are no longer with us, they worked hard to ensure to pass on their ideas, their teachings, to ensure that their legacy would outlast their mortal forms. And I mean, that's kind of if you believe they're really gone. I mean, these people worked with spirits their whole life. They've got to be out there somewhere, their spirits guiding, right? In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research as a way of tracking and documenting their cases. As well, famously, just like shown in the movies, Ed and Lorraine kept a magnificent museum of all the cursed relics, horrible things, and demonic objects that they'd encountered over the years in their cases, including the infamous Annabelle amongst many, many others. She doesn't quite look like how she does in the movies though, she's a little more raggedy in real life. But with Ed and Lorraine no longer around to run the society, it was now left in the hands of their daughter Judy and their son-in-law Tony Spera, who has taken it upon himself to maintain the Warrens' legacy and is a demonologist and paranormal investigator of his own volition. He inherited their museum of cursed objects and he takes care of their most dangerous ones, maintaining the rituals necessary to keep them cleansed and pure. Now, unfortunately, the museum is currently closed at the time of this video, but Mr. Spera is working to get it reopened to the public. Annabelle does tour though, if you're ever looking to catch her in your town. She's got a good agent, I guess, and she makes appearances all over at paranormal conventions. You can take a photo with her. She takes lots of photos with fans. She doesn't really answer too many questions though. She's not a big talker. Spera isn't the only of the Warrens' relatives trying to carry on their legacy, however. Their nephew, one John Zaffis, who I've mentioned a few times on this channel actually, was inspired by stories and tales of his demonologist uncle as a boy and followed in their path, becoming a paranormal investigator himself and opening his own museum of haunted relics just outside of his home, just like his uncle. You gotta wonder if there's any members of the extended Warren family who don't have a museum of cursed relics and if they feel a bit left out. Zaffis' museum, much like the Warrens, is blessed and anointed with holy water and monitored closely by a priest to make sure none of the haunted relics dwelling inside it worm their way loose. Number 1. Maybe it was all fake though. Well, it feels really wrong to end the video on this point, but it also felt really wrong to not mention it all either, and I thought it was either number 5 or number 1, and I settled on number 1 being a better ending. I believe any good skeptic or paranormal enthusiast must always ask themselves the toughest question when it comes to anything supernatural. Was it real, or were they just making it all up, okay? Every Mulder needs a Scully asking those questions. It's been a long-running debate and discussion as to whether or not Ed and Lorraine were really demonologists, or if they were just a pair of very charismatic storytellers, and it was a bit of a complicated ruse to sell a bunch of books and get some movies made. Now, since the Warrens have passed, several stories and more doubt has begun to creep out, decrying the Warrens as nothing more than grandiose storytellers. For one example, the lawyer in the Amityville horror case, who was representing Ronald DeFeo, the assailant who slayed his family, admitted that a majority of the story involving the infamous haunting was all just that, just a story generated under his own admission that he made up over a bottle of wine with the Lutz family. That's the family that moved into the alleged haunted house, as a way of cooking up the story a little bit in the hopes of getting a retrial for Ronald DeFeo. Another example that came out was the haunting in Connecticut case. Very famous case. The Warrens wrote a book on it. There were a few movies made. The Warrens' book detailing their experiences with that case was called In a Dark Place. It was co-authored by Ray Garton, who was a horror novelist who was asked to help out and punch up the novel a little bit. Garton had a bit of an issue though, because he said when he was interviewing the family involved in the case, he found that their stories didn't match up, and frequently they were contradicting each other describing the haunting. Garton asked Ed Warren for advice on what he should do about it, and Ed gave him this response saying, "Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story, just use what works and just make the rest up and just make it scary." Or what about the Enfield case, the basis for the second second Conjuring film, which was greatly exaggerated, as the Warrens only arrived for a single day, uninvited, and were then sent away by the family. Ed Warren told another investigator working the case that we could make some serious money off of this one. And seeing how much money the Conjuring franchise has made, well, it seems like you don't need to be a psychic to see that maybe the truth was getting in the way of a good story just a little bit. Real or not, you cannot deny that the Warrens have a lasting legacy, an entertaining one, and are fascinating to read about. And no doubt we'll be discussing them on this channel and in the world larger for years and years to come.
Number 5. The Pearls of Death. We know the Warrens. If that name doesn't sound familiar, check out some of the other vids on who they were on this channel. They were a pretty spooky duo. They've seen some nightmarish stuff in their time, and still have some proof of the evil that they vanquished. Their son-in-law still runs the official occult museum website and museum out of Monroe, Connecticut. Now, if you've seen Annabelle Comes Home, this first item on the list should ring a bell. The character Daniela in the movie tries to communicate to a loved one beyond the grave. Never a good idea, unless you're with the Long Island medium, you know? Stick with the professionals. In order to do that, however, she puts on the museum's mourning bracelet. Yeah, that's not really a good idea there, Daniela. Now, there isn't really a mourning bracelet in the real occult museum, but there is such a thing as the Pearls of Death. And as of now, the Pearls of Death still have yet to appear in the Conjuring franchise. But they're notoriously one of the most dangerous items in the Warrens Museum, says their son-in-law, and very, very real. Beautiful accessory, I should add, but a very haunted and spirited set of pearls. They were added to the museum after a woman claimed that they were constantly strangling her. The Pearls of Death are said to strangle those who wear them. Now, I know what you're thinking. Get a bigger size, right? Well, it wasn't the wrong fit, per se, but like, choked aggressively. The story goes, the second that this poor woman put on these pearls, she literally needed people around her to even yank the pearls from its death grip around her neck. Yo, that is terrifying. Sometimes when I sleep with my chain on, I feel like I'm in a triangle choke in the UFC. But thankfully for us, the curls currently rest on the Warren shelves, where they'll hopefully stay for the foreseeable future. Tony Spera, the son-in-law of the Warrens and current owner-operator, says, it all goes way back with the cursed objects. Objects that someone put a curse onto. It could be a bracelet, a necklace, or any article that someone performed incantations and rituals over to put bad energy into, as someone or something famously did to the Annabelle doll. I feel like just talking about it, she's gonna show up. In the same way a priest can bless a holy relic, a satanic worshiper or black magic practitioner can curse a belonging, as seen with the Pearls of Death. Number 4, the werewolf paw. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, hit that like button or feel free to leave us a comment down below. Let us know which James Wan Warren story is your favorite. I mean, nothing beats the David's exorcism scene in The Conjuring 3. Yeah, spoiler alert, it's uncomfortable to watch. Some of you will get it. Scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, I swear to God. However, in Annabelle Comes Home, we see another terrifying object just chilling on the shelf. A werewolf claw. Later in the movie, we even see a real werewolf demon thing outside the Warrens' house. And of course, according to Tony Spera, the werewolf paw is a nod to the real 1980s werewolf case that took the Warrens all the way to London, England. A true story of demonic possession, and not just normal demonic possession. That's a weird sentence to say out loud. But we know about this case. Apparently, they watched a television program, Sightings, and police officers and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a real local werewolf, the infamous Bill Ramsey. They said his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a connection to him, and after traveling to London, she found Bill. According to Lorraine, he was possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed a full-blown exorcism. The exorcism was a success on American soil, and Bill was able to return home, ready to start the rest of his non-lycanthropic days. He wouldn't grow hair or change at a full moon, but he used his fingers like claws, attacked people, and even would run around on all fours. Could this wolf paw in the museum be responsible for the werewolf case in London? I think it might. Number 3, the cursed brick. Perhaps one of the least terrifying items on this list is a brick from the Borley Rectory, aka a brick from one of the most haunted houses in all of England. The house was originally built back in 1862. It was a house built for the rector of Borley, but after a fire in 1939, it was never rebuilt. It was finally demolished after in 1944, but before its final days, Harry Price, a paranormal researcher at the time, reported numerous ghostly sightings, including a ghost nun, a ghost car passing by, as well as numerous horse and buggy sounds on the property. That's terrifying. Yep. A little piece of the haunted home sits in the Warren Occult Museum today, as they were able to visit the Borley Rectory before it was demolished. According to local folklore, a nun fell in love with a monk from the monastery and the pair attempted to elope together. They were found and sentenced to death. The monk was reported to have been sent to the gallows in the monastery, whilst the nun was sealed into the walls of the nunnery alive. Ouch. This nun is believed to be the one that is seen on the grounds of the Borley Rectory, endlessly looking for the monk that she once loved. That's kind of cute. That's kind of nice. The nun has been seen and heard many times over the years, and the first reports came from 1928 when the owner Guy Eric Smith and his wife contacted a newspaper to report a strange happenings. The newspaper took on the help of an investigator, Mr. Harry Price. Mr. Price stayed at the house to research for more than a year. While staying there, Price witnessed a ton of poltergeist phenomena. Even said that he got in touch with the spirit of a past tenant, Reverend Harry Bull, who died in the house. After numerous attempts at exorcising the property, in 1930, Mr. and Mrs. Smith left the house for good. The next residents of the house were Reverend Foister and his wife Mary Ann. They both experienced the same phenomena that Price and the Smiths had witnessed before them. However, this time the poltergeist activity seemed to be a little bit more aggressive, with reports of smashed glasses, broken windows, and Mary Ann being even thrown from her bed in the middle of the night. In 1939, the house was burnt to the ground due to an oil lamp. It was then left to ruins until 1944 when it was demolished. The Borley Rectory was said to have been the most haunted building in all of the UK, so although just an unassuming brick, its origin story has seen quite a bit of life and death. Number 2. Black magic dolls. We already know some of the infamous museum dolls that are haunted by all hell, but we're not talking about Annabelle. There are apparently handfuls of other dolls that deserve some jarring honorable mentions. Tony Spera believes that there are dark powers that live amongst the various voodoo dolls and handmade figurines that are just casually splayed out for museum goers. Stuffed dolls like the Shadow Doll, of course, who looks like a night terror version of a twisted Muppets puppet. It's known for visiting dreamers and stopping their heart mid-nightmare with fear. Okay, that's a little excessive. So haunted, yeah. There's a satanic doll that looks like it would resemble a tall wooden man, possibly even the devil. Yeah, haunted beyond all hell. Found in the woods too, around satanic worship. Could you believe? And of course, this dark magic doll. They just look haunted, you know? That off-colorization look, the facelessness, and glass casing around it. Again, that can't be a good sign. Historically, if you do this, obtaining a doll or statue or carving, add in a little dash of dark magic and voodoo, and voila, you have a very dark, cursed item. There's also a doll with no mouth and no eyes. Yeah, that's not scary at all. I think we can all agree that there's like 20 origin films like right here with each and every one of these black magic figurines. Like, I understand Furbies a little bit more now, you know? Like, that's a cursed item right there. 100%. Furbies belong in the Warren Museum. I'm surprised there isn't some there already. And coming at the number 1 spot, the music box. And of course, we had to include one of the creepiest elements of the Conjuring movies, and I guess what makes any scary movie scary. It's the music. And boy, is there one haunted creepy Warren Museum object that comes to mind: the Perron family music box. Director James Wan wanted to use the actual music box in the first film because mirrors and creepy music make for the best thrillers, but also because that there is a real haunted artifact from the real case. Today, the box is safely stored in the Warrens Museum alongside all of the other spooky items that we already covered. The music though, right? Like, this part in the movie actually scared the shit out of me. Like, the anticipation alone. They always do it so slow too, don't they? Dun 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 dun. But it's like real life though. That's horrifying. The music box apparently caused a lot of problems for these Perron girls, specifically April, the youngest of the Perron children. She found this antique in the house and she used to communicate to spirits. In the movie, this was a happy ending, but in real life, the Bathsheba Sherman curse was never really resolved. The original OG film, The Conjuring, was one of the best haunted house movies of the last decade that arguably spawned both a franchise and a new respect for old school horror. I wonder what's next for us in the James Wan universe, because that werewolf paw, yeah, that looks terrifying. Number 5, The Conjuring. The Conjuring is a 2013 horror film directed by James Wan, written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. It is the first film in the Conjuring universe franchise and also based on real events surrounding the Perron family's demonic experiences. Ed was a World War II vet and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist. Lorraine, a self-claimed clairvoyant, making them the best demonic duo out there. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research. They quickly gained notoriety as respected investigators after this case. The Perrons. In 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice odd things happening almost immediately. First, missing items, salt shaker, broom, then some ghostly sightings. Then, well, you'll see. It was discovered that the home had experienced some previous sinister owners, self-immolation, deadly accidents, and of course, murder in the attic. One violent and destructive spirit named Bathsheba. Quote, whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of this house, and she resented the competition of my mother posed for that position. Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter. Bathsheba Sherman, who lived on the Perrons' property circa 1800s, was rumored to have been a Satanist and involved in the murder of a neighbor. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, there were numerous spirits that lived on the premises. The smell of rotten meat, beds levitating, and of course, the dirt-covered, abysmally cold basement. The Perrons asked the Warrens to come in more than 10 separate times on 10 separate occasions to help out their ghost problem. Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing them, to which during the seance Carolyn Perron was possessed. The family swear that she was speaking in tongues and even rising from the ground, sitting in a chair. Andrea said, my mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not of her own. Then her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room. Yeah, that's all the ingredients you need for an amazing horror movie universe to me. Terrifying. Number 4, Annabelle. The infamous Annabelle. We know her. The most haunted doll on Earth. First appearing in The Conjuring in 2013, then Annabelle Creation, then Annabelle Comes Home. I'm just waiting for part 4. Annabelle vs. Anderson Silva, UFC 279 live from Las Vegas. Yo, I'm straight up punting a haunted doll if it runs up on me, I'll tell you that for free. The film was inspired by the story of a doll named Annabelle, told by Ed and Lorraine Warren after obtaining and ridding its evil from its toy-like body. The doll is apparently responsible for 2 near-death experiences, 1 fatal accident, and a string of demonic activity. The doll's origins come from a gift to a young nurse named Donna from her mother for her 28th birthday. Donna brought it back to her apartment she shared with a roommate. Pretty normal Raggedy Ann doll. Then the two began to notice she'd move around on her own. They even started finding notes left around saying, "Help me," written on parchment paper, which they had no clue to even where to buy that or find that. Before long, they called in some help from a medium who insisted that the doll was harboring a spirit who had lived and perished on the grounds prior to their building being built. Medium called the priest called his father called Ed and Lorraine. So yeah, this thing is like haunted. You know when priests are like, oh god, no! Yeah, that's usually not a really good sign. Spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. An inhuman spirit can attach itself to a place or object, and this is what occurred in the Annabelle case. This spirit manipulated the doll and created the illusion of it being alive in order to get recognition. Truly, the spirit was not looking to stay attached to the doll, it was looking to possess a human host. Thank the gods, Ed and Lorraine locked her up in the occult museum where she lays to this day. Just waiting. Number 3, The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut is the first of the Warren universe of horror and is based on all real cases and points. A 2009 gem, it accounts the horrific paranormal case of the Snedekers, who moved into a ghost-infested house in Southington, Connecticut. Carmen and Alan Snedeker, their 3 sons, their daughter, and 2 nieces, all unwillingly now pray for the other side. The eldest Snedeker son unfortunately was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the family moved to Connecticut to be closer to the doctors. What they weren't initially aware of was that the home they were renting was once a funeral parlor. Yeah, tools and bloody furniture just lay as they once did, untouched. Mom notices items going missing. That's just the start. The children start to see strange people in their home at night, specifically a man with long black hair. Their son's drastic personality change, which included violent outbursts and attacks on his family, was then diagnosed with schizophrenia. No one was convinced, though. It was agreed that maybe he was becoming a victim to the house's grim history after all. After weeks in the home to get the full demonic experience, the Warrens came to the conclusion that the morticians that worked on the home previously had practiced some abysmally sinister acts on the lifeless bodies, deepening the home in a twisted, dark origin. After Ed and Lorraine were called in to clean it up, an exorcism or 2, and the house finally became a home again. The case can be reimagined in 2009's Haunting in Connecticut, where the story follows the truth the Snedekers experienced all those years ago. It's pretty scary, yeah. Number 2, The Nun. The 2018 spin-off film and prequel to The Conjuring 2. A demon nun channeling an evil spirit named Valak. The Nun serves as an origin story of sorts within the Warren universe. Sister Irene and priest Father Burke travel to investigate a monastery in 1952 Romania after the Vatican learns of an accident and summons the father to investigate. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon from the 17th century, Valak is the Grand President of Hell. Valak's look in both films were inspired by an experience Lorraine had shortly after investigating the Amityville horror house in 1976. Lorraine was at home in her bed reading when she felt a presence. She saw a black whirlwind of dark mass enter the room. It was like a vortex. Lorraine prayed to be released from the forces of evil. She told it, "Leave and go back where you came from," over and over again. It vanished, but she never forgot. And cue scary movie. Yeah, apparently while investigating the once very haunted Borley Rectory, the most haunted spot in the UK, Lorraine had a run-in with a sinister nun. They ended up coming face to face with the churchyard's ghost, who was, according to lore, a nun buried alive behind the brick walls of the convent centuries ago after having an affair. Apparently Ed took photos on his camera of the Borley Rectory ghosts as they encountered them. Quote, "It was pitch black and there were no lit candles or lights. Photographers snapped photos on a 35mm camera with infrared film. When they developed the images, what appeared to be a spectral nun was seen walking down the aisle praying." And number 1. Part 2. The Conjuring. The devil made me do it. Sounds like a lame Satanist excuse, doesn't it? Actually, now a term of phrase pleaded before a court of law. Yeah, who knew? Could possession under demonic circumstances prove innocence over acts performed while under? This is the 8th installment of the Conjuring universe. The plot is as follows. It's 1981. Ed and Lorraine documented the exorcism of 8-year-old David Glatzel, attended by his family, his sister Debbie, her boyfriend Arn Johnson, and Father Gordon of Connecticut. During the exorcism, Arn invites the demon to enter his body instead of remaining in the boy's. The family, including the Warrens, witnessed the demon transport itself from David's body to Arn's body while he suffers from a heart attack and is taken to the hospital unconscious. Arn and Debbie return home, but Arn is left feeling a little unwell and eventually ends up murdering his landlord, stabbing him 22 times due to this demonic possession. Yeah, sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? His case becomes the first American murder trial to claim demonic possession as a defense. Well, sorry to break it to you, but this is literally a play-by-play of the events that actually happened. Yeah. Maybe not shot for shot, movie style, but the script and skeleton was there for sure. Arn was subsequently convicted after a messy murder trial, though he served only 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. The case was huge. It attracted huge media attention and in fact was the first in history of the US claiming the paranormal as a defense. The couple went on to marry each other, and tell their story as the Warren side as well. Books, documentaries, and eventually this huge film universe. Yo, all of this just got way more scary, right? Like, I gotta rewatch all 8 parts. Who am I kidding? I'm not gonna watch them. I watch horror movies like this, you know? Number 5, Amityville. Believe it or not, there's actually 39 film adaptations made surrounding this case. Yeah, it's the OG case. The first crack at getting this terrifying formula down that we all love today. The Amityville Horror. Yes, the infamous haunting that took place on November 13th, 1974 at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. Well, in some versions 108 Ocean Avenue. Places like that get really popular, you know? The Amityville Horror is a book by American author Jay Anson, published 1977, and it's also the basis of one of the scariest movies ever released from 1979 onwards. The paranormal experiences by the Lutz family has just led to great movies, you know? Spooky stories. It unfortunately has also led to controversy, lawsuits, name defacing, and of course murders and life sentences. But that was before all the media stuff. Hey, it was gruesome times. The LA Times said it was actually more hideously frightening than The Exorcist because it actually happened. DeFeo was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 life sentences. All of his parole appeals have been denied. For nearly 13 months after the murders, the house remained empty until it was bought by the Lutz family. And cue terrifying movie. When the Lutzes moved in, the furniture from the DeFeo family remained intact from the night of the murders. Yeah, they actually didn't know. They just thought it came furnished. That's a ripoff also, I'd be pissed. New couch smell? Nope, just ghost plasma. Yuck. The Warrens' most famous case was the Amityville haunting. This is where 6 members of the DeFeo family were found dead in their beds in 1974. A year later, the Lutzes moved in, and 28 days of this, basically. Also, let us know in the comments down below which Ed and Lorraine case scares the bejesus out of you the most. Like, which movie won't you watch, you know? I don't do dolls, dude. Annabelle gets me every time, I swear to God. Number 4, The Haunted. In 1991, the works of the late great Warrens was finally approached again after years of their demonic work had slowly and surely began to surface. They began fighting the good fight since the 40s, remember? With the success of the Amityville horror in the late 70s and the popularity it brought to the demonology topic within the US, the Warrens' name and reputation was finally appreciated, and they gifted us another gem of a story to film. This 2-hour, made-for-TV film based on the horrific events that took place within the Smurl home in the 80s. The Haunted, released by 20th Century Fox, earned itself 2 Golden Globe nominations. The case file of the Smurls' haunted house in Pennsylvania in the 1970s was infamous for not only demons, but a certain type of evil entity, the incubus and the succubus. This demonic pair usually haunts a sleeping person, and their possession is usually based around a more explicit manner of haunting. Yeah, Google it up, you'll get it. This film does a semi-tasteful 90s job at expressing what the Smurls were actually working with. Spoiler alert, it's pretty messed up. Demons almost quote-unquote breeding with those it possesses. The Smurls' version of their story was the subject of a 1986 paperback book titled The Haunted, of course, where this movie of the same name gets its inspiration from. The Warrens are introduced and explored for the first time in this film. Like many of the film adaptations, the Warrens are first seen performing college lectures into various hauntings. Lorraine is portrayed by Diane Baker. Ed is played by Stephen Markle. A pretty 90s feel to it, you know? Grainy, it's a little campy at times, but it's the first formula to this huge film franchise. Isn't it cool that Ed and Lorraine have been part of the modern horror scene for like 70 years? Their cases have been a part of the horror landscape way before Wan developed his Conjuring universe. Whether you believe in these cases or not, it's clear that they've made an impact. Number 3, Bill Ramsey. Okay, so these Warrens have covered it all. Ghosts, demons, succubuses, even vampires. I'd love to see a good vampire movie, you know? Just Juan takes it into his universe. I'd love to see it. But werewolves? Like, for real? No way. In the 80s, they were fascinated with this werewolf legend, so Lorraine and Ed Warren traveled across the world in search of a real-life wolfman. They watched a television program, Sightings, in which police officer and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a local werewolf, Bill Ramsey, in London, England. Bill himself was questioned about his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease, as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a strange connection to him after this, and after a short trip to London, she found Bill Ramsey's whereabouts. Through British police departments, Lorraine made contact. Lorraine and Ed discovered that unlike most werewolf folklore, he does not change physically every moon, or it wasn't a bite that originally caused him to transform. Bill Ramsey, according to Lorraine, was possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed help with a full-blown exorcism. The Warrens brought Bill back to Connecticut to meet Bishop Robert McKenna of Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Church, and he agreed to perform an exorcism for Bill. The exorcism was a success, and thanks to everyone, today Bill lives a pretty normal life. I'd hope so. This is terrifying. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, if that came to theaters, it would probably slap and horrify at the same time. Good problems, you know? Number 2, Japan tour. In the mid-1990s, Ed and Lorraine found themselves overseas in Japan, visiting Nagoya and Tokyo with a team of translators for a small tour of where Ed was stationed in World War II. And of course, some hauntingly terrifying demonic run-ins. First day, they went to see these haunted tunnels. Second day, they have haunted house run-ins with headless samurai. And thirdly, they witness and help out with a full-blown exorcism. Yeah, talk about a busy week. It's like a Warren 3-in-1 package deal. Their first day consisted of visiting a set of condo buildings apparently riddled with a ghost infestation. Beheaded samurai soldiers haunt the hallways, a ghostly couple and the woman ghost of the gallows haunt the premises. The second night, they visited a haunted salt mine tunnel. Ed said it was the scariest place he had ever been to. The tunnel had buried some odd 200 people alive when an avalanche caved miners in. Ouch. The third night consisted of this. That's right, a very, very unsettling, real exorcism. Okay, yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight at all. The Warrens sat in on 3 high priests of knowledge and spirituality known as disciples as they watched an apparent snake demon slither its way out of a person before their very eyes. And of course, this footage of a young woman speaking in not her first language, but tongues. Just moaning in agony. It's kind of hard to watch all that demonicness. Spooky level? 10 out of 10, 100%. And the number 1 spot, Maurice Theroux. And we come to Maurice. This one is terrifying on its own. It doesn't need a 3D movie follow-up. Maurice Thoreau began to notice young he was able to do things that no other man is capable of. Superhuman strength, knowledge of more than his academia showed. He was different. He worked around New England for years doing odd jobs and yet suffering through several relationships. After a physical examination and psychological test failed to bring any solution to the situation, the Warrens were finally called in. The Warrens were gaining popularity as a paranormal aid and had already worked on several cases. The activity ranged from low-level poltergeist activity to this aggressive physical demonic attack stuff. Apparently one night while trying to recite the Hail Mary to make the possession stop, Maurice became so violent he even tried to choke out his own wife. The Warrens made the decision that this was not a normal haunting but a possession and would need the help from Bishop Robert McKenna, who agreed to perform an exorcism. After examining Maurice, Bishop McKenna performed the ritual right away. Dude, that's terrifying. He's just staring off like a reptile. Apparently the demon identified itself simply as, quote, "I am what I am." And also, of course, invoking the kingdom, referring to demons from the legions of evil type stuff. The exorcism was successful, thank God. A young French-Canadian character appears in The Nun, and is supposedly loosely based on the real Maurice, who the Warrens actually think might have been possessed by the devil himself. What do you think?
Number 5. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal or anything. Almost immediately after its constructions, the stories of hauntings started to come out. A local legend says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had an affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. And since then, there's been all manner of legend about her spirit roaming, seemingly in the halls of the rectory. The film The Nun could possibly be based on this. In 1900, the 4 daughters of the estate owner all said they saw a nun wandering around the estate at night. When they tried to speak to her, they got no response. The family had repeatedly claimed they'd seen this nun around their property, and at one occasion, what they thought was the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider. From there on, there was constant reportings of bizarre sounds, strange shadows. In 1927, the original family owning the estate had all passed, and a new family moved in and immediately started experiencing hauntings all the same. The new family, the Smiths, discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag shortly after unpacking. They reported poltergeist behavior like unexplained footsteps, lights flickering around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. After only 2 years, the Smith family left the rectory, unable to deal with the hauntings present. The next family, the Foysters, experienced, well, wouldn't you know it, all the same things. Objects flying around their home, and on one occasion, claimed that their daughter was attacked by something horrible. They swiftly moved out as well, and the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, knocking over a lantern. Although an insurance report claims that they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil remains in the Borley Rectory, or maybe he unleashed it onto the world. Now my friends, if you want to hear more scary stories about haunted houses and just about everything else under the sun, we're the place to be. Subscribe and creep on creeping on. Number 4. Roland Doe. Now the story of Roland Doe is fairly notable as far as famous exorcisms go, mainly because Roland Doe's case served as the inspiration for the legendary horror film The Exorcist. Roland Doe, a name for the anonymous boy, lived a quiet life in Maryland. He was the family's only son and didn't have much in the way of friends while growing up, save for his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist and lover of the occult. When Roland was young, she gifted him a Ouija board and taught him how to use it. Now in 1949, dear old Aunt Harriet would pass away, devastating Roland and the family. After her passing, the family started to experience strange, inexplicable occurrences around the home. Scratching would come from inside the walls, water would be leaking out of all the pipes, and curiously, Roland's bed would be moved around in the middle of the night. Confused, the family sought out the experts of everyone they knew, and their local minister suggested they needed the help of an exorcist. Priests came to exorcise the home and Roland, believing that the boy had been possessed by the devil. They strapped him to a mattress to begin, but had to stop when he broke the straps and slashed one of the clergymen with the strap. Red scratches appeared all over his body, reading out the word Louis. The family believed this was a sign they needed to move to St. Louis, where the family had relatives. From there, they were put into contact with a series of priests who would conduct round-the-clock exorcisms on Roland. The days would pass normally, but at night, the battle would begin when Roland would enter a trance-like state, speaking in Latin, gutturally growling, even threatening priests that Satan had taken him. For weeks, the priests toiled tirelessly to exorcise the demon, until eventually there was a miracle breakthrough. The priests called upon the power of St. Michael and told the demon he was coming to battle them. Roland woke the next morning and said he had a vision of Satan and St. Michael on a heavenly battlefield, fighting for control of his soul, and that he knew Satan was gone. From here, Roland lived a happy, healthy, normal life, and his case might have been forgotten if author William Blatty wasn't inspired by the case after reading a story about it in the paper. But without him, we never would have got The Exorcist, so it all worked out, mostly. Number 3. The Crescent Hotel. Now, the Crescent Hotel is a beautiful stop if you're ever visiting Arkansas. It's been called the Grand Old Lady of the Ozarks due to its gorgeous old Gothic design and wonderful view of the mountains. What a shame that such a beautiful spot is said to be home to tortured souls unable to move on. During construction of the Crescent Hotel, a worker named Michael plunged from the death, fatally landing in room 218. The room has since been a hotspot for paranormal activity, with bizarre noises and laughter reportedly heard by the guests. But this wouldn't be the only haunting present at the Crescent Hotel. You see, before it found life as a hotel resort and a spa, the Crescent Hotel was run by a charismatic charlatan named Norman Baker, who ran an alternative clinic out of the hotel, claiming the spring waters had restorative powers and could cure any ailments. Of course, Baker didn't even have the slightest medical experience or training and was far closer to a two-bit con man than he was a doctor. Patients would check in and never leave. Baker would promise patients a cure for everything up to cancer, when in reality he was just injecting them with corn silk and water. Baker was arrested for his crimes in 1949, but the souls of those he tormented wouldn't find peace yet. All throughout the hotel, guests report strange noises, scratchings, whisperings, with some going so far as to say they see ghastly figures, floating orbs, and such. There's even a notable ghost who wanders the halls. A nurse named Theodora is the hotel's most prominent ghost, who manifests as an old woman flustered out of room 14. She hates mess and discord, and many guests report that they'll discover their belongings have been rearranged if they're staying in her room. There's even sightings of a ghost cat named Morris, who luckily is a benevolent spirit. Guests report hearing purring or feeling a mysterious warm brushing against their legs. I just hope there's meow mix in the afterlife. Number 2. The Winchester House. William Winchester was the heir to the Winchester rifle throne, and married to his wife Sarah, they lived happily. They welcomed a daughter, although tragically she fell ill immediately and passed before her first birthday. Shortly after, William would pass as well, leaving Sarah alone, depressed, and with roughly $20 million kicking around. In 1886, Sarah used the money to move from Connecticut to California and began construction on her legacy, her mansion. It was built for 20 years. She paid workers night and day round the clock, demolishing one improvement to make another. But the house wasn't built like any other house. It seemed random, like it was being built out of a dream. A staircase that goes nowhere, ending at the ceiling. Multiple boarded up rooms. She spent roughly $5 million on the construction of the odd home. But why? Did she just want something to start conversations when dinner guests were over? Well, shortly after her family tragedies, Sarah visited a psychic for advice, who told her she was being cursed by the spirits of all the lives taken by her husband's rifles. That is a lot of angry cowboys. She was told she needed to build a mansion to capture the wandering souls and seal them away from the rest of the world, and she made it her life's mission to accomplish this. She thought that the house's bizarre design would confuse spirits and keep them at bay. I honestly don't know about that. I thought ghosts could float and go through walls. I don't even know if they would care. The house still stands and is a popular tourist spot for fledgling ghost hunters, who believe that her massive ghost trap did work and she's caught spirits, with reportings of mysterious sounds. There are some who even claim that Sarah herself has been trapped in her home, doomed to walk amongst the spirits she worked so hard to capture. Number 1. The Bell Witch. In the 1800s, a farmer named John Bell moved his family to Adams, Tennessee, onto a bountiful 300-acre farm. Bell quickly became a figurehead of the community, respected by many, and becoming a local leader at his town's church. For the Bell family, things were the brightest they've ever been. They were living the dream. But things wouldn't be good for long, and they'd find themselves in a nightmare. By 1817, strange things started to occur around the farmstead. John found a mysterious animal, a mutant hybrid that resembled a grotesque mix between a dog and a rabbit. The Bell children would complain to their father that they would hear strange sounds that sounded like vermin gnawing at all things in their bedrooms, and the children would wake up with scratches all over their bodies. At all hours of the day, everyone in the family would complain that they could hear faint whispering and singing, and that it sounded like an old woman was singing hymns on their wall. Most tragically, the Bells found a mysterious vial of liquid inside their home that no one could understand. Nervous about what it was, John Bell offered a small amount of it to their cat, who passed almost immediately after. For 3 long years, the Bell family was tormented by these strange occurrences, chalking it up to a mysterious entity that would later be known as the Bell Witch, named after the mysterious old humming that they kept hearing. In 1820, John Bell grew extremely ill, quickly descending in health and passing. At his funeral, the mourners complained that all they could hear was the laughing of an old woman, mocking and singing at the late John Bell. The farm was so notable that it even caught the attention of President Andrew Jackson, who in 1819, a year before John Bell's passing, visited it to see if the legends of the witch were true. Allegedly, as soon as his carriage arrived at the property, the horses refused to budge anymore. The animals can always tell.